podcast. Today's guest is Konn. Hi, Konn.
Hi, Rook. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, can you tell our listeners when you first realized you wanted to become an author and a graphic designer?
Yeah. Writing, I've always enjoyed writing since I was like a little kid, like 8 years old, and I was writing backstories originally for really terrible board games I used to make, and they were like play figures on a grid, and I got more into making the backstories and experimented with going into that route and
Mhm.
eventually branched into like messing around with comics and animation with cartoons, like went all over the map during my teens and high school. But ultimately I found like I really just wanted to focus on the story, and these other mediums were taking up too much time just because they have other aspects to them that contribute to the story, where I just wanted to focus on the words. So I
Yeah.
guess 8 years old to answer that.
Wow. So, have you ever thought about writing your own comic book series? Like,
I have thought about coming back to it, but it really just comes down to time. There's just not
mm,
enough time to do everything, and
mhm.
the size of the stories that I'm really wanting to tell seem to fit best in a book for now.
Gotcha. Wow, that's cool. So, can you tell us tell our listeners what inspired you to write Mental Damnation series?
Yeah, that was actually the very first thing, and date it back to that when I was 8 years old. The board game was this fantasy thing that mutated over time and changed from this. It was like a island with war, and that was the whole story to the board game. But then, as I kept writing more backstories, I eventually came up with the idea for Mental Damnation when I was about, ooh, I think 16. I think it was 16. And yeah, that's when that series was birthed. But I wrote the original manuscript in high school, was completely terrible, but I picked it back up after high school and got cleaned it all up, worked with a wonderful editor, and she taught me a bit of stuff too on how to just clean up the story. And the story evolved and mutated, and I scrapped a lot of the original stuff from high school, and it turned into this 4-part dark fantasy series.
Wow. So, are you going to do like sequels to that series or anything? You are?
Yes. Yeah,
Nice.
I've kind of got two sequels in mind. I don't, so I want to get to those. But the neat thing about most of the stories that I write is they're all part of this superverse known as the Macrocosm, and that was an
Wow.
idea I've had this idea forever, where every story is linked in the same universe.
Mhm.
And a new series that I'm writing, it's going to take some time to come out, but it's kind of like the Macrocosm's version of Stephen King's Dark Tower, the way that
Oh.
had his connect everything. The
Uh-huh.
Macrocosms is this new series I'm working on, but it's about a year or so off, so got to write it.
Ooh. I love the Dark series. That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite by him.
Nice.
That's
Yeah, it was fun.
nice. That's nice. So, how did you develop the characters?
For Mental Damnation was a weird one. It because it took that long God, so 2000, let's say 16. So it'd be, yeah, about a 12, 14 year time period from writing it back in high school to finishing book 4. But the original character is named Krista, and she's the whole series follows her, and she's this reptoid kind of creature. So it's kind of fun where it made humans the bad guy. But then there's a third party as well, and the characters just kind of had been stuck with me since high school. So it's like I've always known them. It's like, yeah, I have a few friends you keep from high school, and you kind of grow and evolve with them. And it was neat being in book 4, which was, I think I finished writing in 2020. So I had matured so much in these characters. And no discredit to them or my abilities at the time, but like, I think I was just getting over them quite a bit because I've had them for so long. And
Yeah.
yeah, I guess they originally came as backstories to the board
Wow.
games originally.
Wow, that's nice. That's nice. So, how did you come up with the title?
The title, and this is where it gets even more meta. So none of this actually happened, but like the main character Krista was supposed to be a villain for a story that I wrote. I did write it, and it's never going to see the light of day because it's really bad. And but she was going to be a villain in it. So the Mental Damnation series was going to be a prequel series of why she became a bad guy, and I abandoned that entire plot line. But Mental Damnation, the title came about from the brain disease within the story, and that was going to be the primary plot point that makes her go mad essentially and becomes a bad guy. Is this brain disease makes you think you're in hell, and your
Wow.
reality starts to fall apart, and in your dreams you cross over into this hellish landscape known as Dreadweave Pass, where this fallen god is coming to get you and he needs your blood. But then during the day, some of these nightmares flash and appear in the real world, so she starts to go crazy. And that's that's the name of the series.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to add that to my reading list. I'm
Yeah,
like, because it does sound a little bit like Dark Tower, and I love it. So yeah,
nice.
I love it. I love it. So, what's your favorite chapter and why?
Hmm, it's a tough one. I think it would probably be in book 2, Dream, where Krista meets her ghoulish companion named Malferettes, and he
Mhm,
is a very big primary character in the Mental Damnation series, and he's actually a big part in my short story collections, the Macrocosm. So he shows up
mhm,
in multiple books, and his character's always been fun because he's kind of like a Cheshire cat type character, where he's mysterious and not really sure what he's up to, but he's kind of a good guy.
mhm,
And it's the first chat. No, it's got to be like chapter 8 or something, but there's the chapter in Dream where the two of them meet for the first time. And yeah, it's my favorite because they develop a very strange bond, where she teaches him things even though he's really ancient, and he's kind of bitter and spiteful because he's been around for so long.
Ooh. I'm at it. So, so can you give our listeners a brief summary of your series? Like,
Yeah, yeah. So for Mental Damnation, it's a dark fantasy series that follows a reptilian named Krista, and she gets this brain disease where she thinks she crosses into hell, and a fallen god needs her blood to basically free him from the chains that imprison him. Now,
mhm,
during the real world, though, her people and the humans have this long-running tension that dates back hundreds and hundreds of years. So she's the first of her people to be on the surface, and the humans don't know what to do about her. So there's this politics involved as well, and so she's torn between these two worlds of trying to escape this mental hell while the humans are
mhm,
trying to use her as like a political agenda, and
mhm.
she's basically trapped in the real world and in the dream world.
I can't wait to read it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
my mouth is like open wide the whole time you're explaining. I'm like,
yeah. Oh, nice.
but
Yeah, book one's free. It's been perma free, I think, since 2020 in ebooks. So yeah,
oh,
enjoy.
it's free on the ebooks.
Yeah, book
Oh,
one is free, and then yeah, on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, all those.
oh, wow, wow.
Yeah.
So, so can you tell our listeners what inspired your book series, Macro? I'm going to
Oh yeah,
mispronounce it. No, I am. But you,
Macrocosm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That one, yeah, that one has been a lot of fun. It took a lot of twists and turns because it came about after I finished writing my crime novel, Yegman. Writing a book's
Mhm.
a lot of work, and especially if you're self-publishing, you're doing managing
Yeah.
this big project. You've got covers, you got the
Mhm.
promos, the press, the marketing,
Mhm.
and you still have to be the writer. So I was kind of burnt out in 2018, and a good friend of mine was like, "Why don't you just write some short stories and less risk, less reward, or less risk and not as big of a reward, but you might not burn out." I was like, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And in May of 2018, I started a short stories monthly series on my blog where once a month I would write a brand new short story. And I figured it served a few purposes. Instead of spending like a year or two, sometimes 3 years writing a book and fans just waiting around for 3 years, it's like once a month, there's something new on the blog. It was free for everyone. Go to the blog or sign up to the newsletter and you get a new story. Fans got something new. I got to practice the writing in different genres and styles. And ultimately, I wanted to take like a big chunk of them and put them into a short story collection. And that's kind of how the Macrocosm came about, where after 2 years of doing them, I compiled all these short stories into a volume. But because they jumped genres and styles so much, I didn't want to just mash it together and say, here you go, guys. So I put an overarching story involved with Malferetti's, the ghoulish character from Mental Damnation. He comes back and he works with the reader. So like the story is told in second person, where you, the reader, are working with Malferetti's to figure out what happened to your memories. And that's why you have to go to these short stories and basically try and figure out who you were. And that's why you witness these other lives to see like, hey, is this person in this other life me? But then you come back and try to figure it out. Yeah, and that's how the Macrocosm came about. And then there's a second one coming out. I'm hoping for this June that continues the story of you, the reader, with Malferetti's, but it's a choose your own adventure styled story.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
It's
interactive.
really nice. Wow. So how did you develop these characters?
They for all the short stories, it sometimes I just come up with it the day of. I'll admit
Wow.
sometimes yeah, because like even doing one thing once a month, I do leave it to the last minute. So I have to write it like the weekend of, and it's coming out that Wednesday, and I'm like, oh man, I better come up with something. So
That's cool though. That
yeah,
is
so it's a
cool.
lot of
Wow.
pantsing, where like the novels, it's more I do a lot more plotting with novels.
Ah, gotcha. Wow. Wow. You do a lot.
Yeah.
like, like it's making me think. I don't know if I want to write a book now. But
A
so
lot of work.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. So can you tell our listeners what inspired your book series, The Ruthford Manor? Is that right?
Oh, Rutherford. Yeah,
Rutherford.
that one was a lot of fun because that's not actually like it's a bigger story than me. It also happened in 2018. So
Yeah.
that was a big year. I used to do a lot of conventions
Mm,
before 2020 with like horror, comic conventions, book conventions, and I met the the owner and CEO of Rutherford Manor, who takes care of it's a haunt here in Edmonton
mhm,
that branched off into kind of a bigger idea with comics. They have a board game in the works, and they have a TV pitch trailer that they're still working with as well. But yeah, basically, it's this whole universe, different intellectual property. They asked me if I wanted to write some books within their universe, and I was like, yeah, sure. And they published them. They sent them out to their publishing route, and yeah, so that one's a
wow.
fun one because it's a historical supernatural drama, I guess is the best way
Oh,
to
wow.
put it. Yeah.
Wow. Can you give our listeners like a brief summary of the series? I'm
Yeah.
interested in that one too.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Like yeah, so because it's supernatural, it deals with demons and witches, and it's also the turn of the century, so late 1800s. Everyone's coming out of the Victorian age, but also
Mhm,
things are getting strangely close to like the First World War.
mhm.
Technology starting to really burst because
Wow.
it's the late 1800s. So it takes place in Illinois. Yeah, in Illinois, if I remember. I think so. I wrote those a while ago, but yeah, it follows a family who lives in a small depressive town, and they have the regular struggles of trying to make ends meet, but they are pretty sure their family is cursed because they all seem to have like these connections to dark deeds or troublesome pasts. Like the first book, The White Hand, things are so bad for them that they get into the resurrectionist business, which was a profession of digging up bodies to sell to doctors. And it was a whole underground market at the time. And they have their struggles with that. While with book two, their daughters end up having connections with some witches, and that tends to go south after a demon gets involved. So they end up struggling and stumbling into a bunch of dark stuff that they shouldn't be involved with.
That sounds good too. Wow.
Yeah.
So can you tell our listeners about your Patreon and what type of content you have on there for your readers?
Yeah, the Patreon is where the short stories moved. So after 2 years or so of them being free on the blog, I decided to migrate them over to Patreon. And I've had, a number of subscribers that have been consistent, and they check it out, and they seem to really enjoy the monthly short stories. They get, the monthly short story, the artwork in high-res download, an audio version of the short story.
Wow.
Yeah, and then they get some behind-the-scenes stuff like voting privileges, early access to certain stuff, and then a monthly random facts that I find. And then they also get access to the Wikipedia, which shows the whole universe and everything.
Ooh, I'll have to subscribe. Wow. So on your Patreon, you have like your own designs on there too? Like where you
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
it. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna have to look on there now. Like I skimmed through it, but I couldn't really get on it yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm gonna do that. So what advice would you give our listeners who want to pursue a writing career like yourself?
Write a lot, and definitely take advice from people who've been in the industry quite a bit, to try and avoid certain mistakes, because you could save yourself potentially years of doing things wrong and then having an aha moment, and you could have just bypassed all that. And
That's
just
true.
keep writing all the time. Write for you, and then learn to let go of the writing so you can ask for feedback and not get crushed by it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I follow a lot of authors, and I've interviewed a lot of authors, and a few of them post like their reviews and stuff. I'm like, I don't know if I want to start writing now.
Yeah.
I don't want that. But that is great advice which you use. I want to thank you so much for coming on my podcast today and chatting with me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Brooke. This has been a lot of fun.
You have a great day.
You too. Ciao.
Bye.